So, hervorragend. Ganz herzlichen Dank an Professor Dr. Florian C. Klemann von der Hochschule in München für diese sehr interessante und informative Talkrunde. Wir machen selbstverständlich direkt weiter. Hier geht es Schlag auf Schlag. Die nächste Keynote, die wir gleich hören, hat den Titel Einkauf neu gestalten, Ergebnisse verändern, die Kraft des Umbruchs und Innovation. So, und weil sich viele Dinge auf Englisch natürlich viel besser anhören, haben wir uns gedacht, werden wir diese Keynote einfach kurzerhand auf Englisch abhalten. Das nennt sich dann Revamp Procurement, Transform Results, the Power of Disruption and Innovation. So, und jetzt brauchen wir natürlich auch Personen, die in dieser Keynote wissen, wovon sie sprechen und wie sie sprechen. Ich habe es gerade schon gesagt, das Ganze wird auf Englisch stattfinden. Deswegen hätte ich jetzt gerne einen erwärmenden und einen wunderbaren deutsch-englischen Applaus für unsere Keynote-Speaker. Hier sind Elisabeth Schlag-Lawrence von Bayer und Jamie Ogilvie-Smals von GEP. Herzlich willkommen beim Procurement Summit 2023.
Fantastic. So it's great to be here. Delighted to be here. Thank you, Elisabeth, for joining me on stage as well.
Yes.
Sorry, you're very popular today, having just been on.
Hello, everyone. Exactly.
So just to introduce myself, I'm Jamie Ogilvie-Smals. I'm head of service delivery for Europe at GEP. That means I'm responsible for leading some of our strategic client engagements, making sure we deliver great results, but also helping them innovate, improve procurement maturity. And this is going to be a joint presentation between Bayer and GEP. We work closely together. And we really want to focus on two things, in innovation and disruption. And for us, innovation is key. In the fast-moving pace of change procurement is dealing with today, and that's not going to slow down, that's going to increase. How do we actually deal with those challenges? We have to challenge ourselves, leverage innovation to make sure we can be successful in future. And then disruption, which I know is very close to your heart, Elisabeth. For us, challenging the way things work, challenging why we do things a certain way, is absolutely essential, combined with that innovation to be successful. And I think that for us, disruption is a whole range of things. It's obviously things like technology. There's some great tools out there, lots of examples today, but it's things like mindset, it's collaboration, it's how we work, it's what we even do as procurement, and it's how we work with partners as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce Elisabeth, my co-host today, SVP, Head of Governance and Enabling at Bayer, and a highly respected procurement leader, speaker. And I know you have a big passion for innovation and disruption, Elisabeth. So we're going to speak in English today for a bit of a change. Personally struggling with the German at this point. If there are questions in German, Elisabeth will cover those at the end.
I'll take those. I'll do the translation mode.
Okay,
right?
Over to you.
Great. Okay, can you guys, you know, there's two spots they always say that are not ideal. The one is always immediately after lunch, when everybody goes into the lunch coma, right? And the other one is immediately before lunch. So for those of you who are passionate about the topic, thanks for being here, and hopefully, you know, we'll make it a very interactive session. Please ask us your question. Again, I can also take them in German, but I think you also have your QR code in front of you at the chair. Is that good? Okay. So you said this works like this, right? Aha. So I won't go too much into the intro. I was asked to do a bit of an intro about who we are and who I am as a person. I guess I've been doing this for a few years. I'm very, very passionate about procurement, for those of you who I know. I like to be very disruptive in our thinking. I truly feel one of the main reasons I always want to make a point to come to this event, among others, because I truly think that in Germany we can disrupt the space as well. And I really think there is hope for us to kickstart some excitement here in this industry. I don't think it's about years of service that we've all done, myself included. I think it's about thoughts and about our mindset. And to me, that's what this is all about. So some of my background, you can see up here the companies I've been with, all that. But most importantly, I'll just give you a quick overview about Bayer. But this is not one of the things we wanted to do is make this keynote different. Because keynotes are very often like, oh, it's the sponsor and he's going to tell you why you have to buy them or something, right? We're not going to do this as a sales pitch. We're going to make this hopefully with some content you can take away. So I'm not going to excessively go into too many details. You can read for yourself. I mean, we have over 100,000 employees worldwide. We have 50 billion in sales, and we have 3 very, very, very different divisions. When I first came in, I come mostly from, you saw the companies up there, mostly from fast-moving consumer goods, some banking, a few others. I was also in consulting. I came in and I thought I was so smart. And I was like, oh, there must be a way to tie this all together. And yes, there is, right? Some days we have our hope. But some days we are also 3 very different businesses. And I'm sure many of you also face this every day, that you are 3 very different businesses where you try to unify the thought process and the mindset. These are the businesses here, specifically crop protection. I'm sure many of you know. We are in a very specific area where we're doing actually a lot of innovation. If you think agriculture, crop, sounds kind of old-fashioned, right? Like, I don't know, logistics business some days, if I may say, places where we haven't always moved the needle as much. But the cool thing with us is we now have drones where we can fly in and we can actually do very specific targeted event distribution of our product. Same thing in pharmaceuticals. We have a very interesting area of R&D and also in consumer, but all of you know our product, obviously. So who is procurement? I am the head of, it's called governance and enabling. I wish I could come up with a way better term, and I may have to do that. I've been with the company for going on September. It's going to be 2 years, a very short. Everyone else I meet in the company has been there 25, 30, 35, long time, right? So very classic. And that's a good thing. And the cool thing in our company, I have to say, and I really mean this, the majority of the people you run into, they are, while they've been there all of their corporate life in many cases, their mindset, I don't know if you agree with that, is very different. And they have actually gone from different role to different role to different role within the organization, and thereby bring a very different opportunity with them. And it's actually a very, very cool place to work in. So I'm very fortunate I work in procurement. We head up governance, enabling all of the foundation behind the scenes for all of procurement. So, everybody has their mission statement that they believe in. I'm not going to get into all of this. But the most important thing we all believe in is that we are a purpose-driven company. And that truly, to me, that's what makes procurement go here. And I feel really that we have a chance to make procurement go here versus just here. We're all big thinkers. We all spend a lot of time philosophizing around, could spend endless times talking about processes, but I really think it's about what you're doing. And I'm very proud that in this case, it's very exciting. So we enable Bayer's vision, which is health for all, hunger for none. So 26 billion in spend, 55,000 suppliers, not something I'm always proud of every day. But when you try to reduce that, believe me, it's not so easy. And I've only been here very briefly, but we've actually, as a team, we've actually done quite a bit of work on it. You see here the complexities, don't need to tell you everything, but our ecosystem is quite complex. So 8 years ago, I think it was, my boss, Thomas Udison, the CPO, came, and he actually started this whole journey of transformation. And he really believed in a different operating model. And we shifted, as some of you have done and some of you still wrestle with, to a center-led operating model where we actually now have a globalized approach to doing procurement. And I like to call it center-led versus centralized. Because I think centralized, you're just forcing people, you have to always, but center-led means the vision and the strategy and the center-led approach is driven by us as a center of excellence in that sense. So think of my team as like a form of a center of excellence on steroids. And the rest of it is then regionalized and localized, as I'm sure many of you have. But challenging at times, right? Because in the region, people will be like, well, I want to buy this and I want to do that. So we definitely still have that sometimes, but it's a balance that we're trying to reach. And what we're going into next, you see at the top, the infusion of thought leadership and innovation via lighthouses. I'll talk about that in a second. And in 2022, we actually now really are trying to optimize the user experience. And that's where Jamie comes in. Because what we have the procurement organization that is center-led. Then we have Jamie, who in some areas in GEP helps us significantly. We're going to get into that model in a second. And then last but not least, we of course have operational procurement behind the scenes. And you're going to speak to this too. So we are very much partners along the pipeline here. And it's extremely important to us to have achieved that. And that was a big part of our globalization journey. You all have these slides just as much as us. Is everybody trying to find smart approaches to the challenges we are facing in the industry, of course, right? But in some ways, I don't know, maybe I've been around too long, but in some ways it's always been around. It's always, I mean, I lost a shipment, I don't know, 20 years ago where I was at a large retailer and we just didn't have the goods because nobody predicted that Indonesia was going to have a geopolitical challenge. And next thing you know, everybody evacuated the factory and it was empty and the goods didn't come. So you had an empty store in the US with 1 million units. So I think some of these things are not new, but I think the topics are new. I think the risks are far bigger than they've ever been. We all know this. And I think the speed of it is so much more quick. So what are we going to do about it? So what, right? Who's our organization? I thought you would just show you a little bit behind the scenes. Oops, let's see, go back. A little bit behind the scenes. We have a good amount of diversity, which I'm very proud of, by the way. To me, it's not about always just, emphasizing like we had before in the panel, it's more a matter of saying, let's do the job right, and whoever does the job right should be in the role. So I think that's very cool, and I think that's always served many of us right, and I feel very, very strongly about that. Also, of course, being, I guess, part of the diversity. But I'm proud we have half-half, 40%, 44% female. And if we go on to the most important part, underlying all of this transformation, it is people. We've actually physically, I don't think have you ever worked at a company that's done a whole assessment on people and culture? Who's worked in a company where they've done that? Should we do more of that? Does that sound like something interesting?
Yeah.
Right? So how can it even be that we don't talk more about these kind of things? So for those of you who would be interested, join us to innovate this space a bit more, but actually transform where we are today in culture. So we are actually, just to give you, I can go into this in more detail if you want later, but in the interest of time, it's all about moving our culture from one of the people sitting back and a show-me culture, which we had pockets of, to a culture of engagement where they felt they wanted to be part of the solution. And I think you're seeing that as well. A failure culture, something very different. And this is, I will say, is it Olive Bayer some days? No, we try our best to all of us influence each other. But we have over 600 people in procurement. And I just like this slide because to me, if anybody's ever read the book Failing Forward, why not? Right? Can't we do some of these things and then catch each other? And I'm not saying you're going to take, risk by going into a high-risk country and place goods that you shouldn't be placing there. I'm talking about small, quantifiable amounts. So we actually built these lighthouses, and we can get into this a little bit more in the interest of time. I'm going to turn over to you. Yep. We built lighthouses that, for us, focused on some of these key topics that we thought were critical for us to make a difference in. And there's a lot of disruption happening there, but most importantly, we first want to stabilize, then we optimize, and then we disrupt as we go through this process. And Jamie's and GEP is very, very much one of that. So last but not least, we had to create this common North Star of where we were heading so that everybody could be on the same path and we wouldn't have this disjointed approach to what we were doing. And in comes Jamie with the model that we pursued.
Thanks, Elisabeth. Great background and lots of coverage of different topics there from the buyer side. Just quickly introducing GEP, just so you understand where we're coming from. So we're a procurement specialist. We provide procurement consulting, managed services, and software. And really bringing those three together to bring innovation to procurement is really our mission. Global organization recognized as a leader. We're actually a diverse business ourselves. And the focus on sustainability at Bayer and more generally is a really big focus for us as well. The work we do, as Elisabeth mentioned, at Bayer is we perform a big chunk of the sourcing and contract management on behalf of Bauer as an organization, but very much as one team, part of the organization, and working very closely together. So in terms of a few of the innovative things we've done together, or some of the disruption. So I'm going to start with the first one being about how we actually work together. And speaking to procurement people, this is sometimes a little bit strange. You know, a lot of procurement people might say, you know, you're a supplier, but actually, if you want to get best value, working together is where you can do that. So we have had a relationship for a number of years, and then as Elisabeth showed in that journey, around 2019, there was a significant change driven on the buyer side, and we really set up this new strategic partnership. And in fact, at the very start of that, talking about people and culture, Thomas's idea, we got together as joint leadership teams from both sides and go, what are we going to do? How are we going to work together? Who's going to do what? And how are we going to make this successful? And most importantly, how are we going to drive value for buyer stakeholders, for teams on both sides, for suppliers, and progress buyer's mission through procurement? And so that is in itself is a really interesting approach. And we've ended up with this lighthouse journey you can see, as well as some of these guiding phrases. 1 + 1 = 3. Forgive the math, okay? But 1 + 1 = 3. How do we work together to get the best of both worlds, to join forces and create more value from that? No one organization knows everything, even buyer, I think you'll agree, Elisabeth. On the flip side, 1 + 1 = 1. It's no good having two completely different organizations doing separate things. So it's really about how do you work together as one team with one voice to work together effectively. It's worth saying we've had a lot of challenges. We've also made tremendous progress along this journey. One of the challenges you might have heard of, 6 months into our transition, COVID pandemic hit. We had global teams all over the world trying to run a transition. That was not easy to manage, but we got through that, and we've made tremendous progress. But I think for us, the overall partnership construct is very unusual, very effective. And then the team's collaboration, as you can see a couple of the pictures there, on both sides is really, really crucial. How do you work together is really effective. And all of it in, we stole it from you, Elisabeth, this framework of the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. How do you stabilize things, make them work? How do you then optimize them? But then how do you disrupt, change, make improve value? And so how do those two come together in an effective way? One, we've got the partnership, but secondly, how do you actually disrupt by using the strengths of both sides, both in terms of what those strengths are, but also then how you actually make that work? So obviously on the buyer side, a huge amount of strengths around very clear procurement strategy, really in-depth knowledge of the business, very different business units, but huge experience there, of course, and real knowledge of how things work, processes at buyer, etc. So a lot of strengths. On the flip side, from the GEP side, we work with lots of organizations, lots of global companies in many different sectors. So how can we bring best practices, external examples, and challenge buyer on those things? How can we bring procurement thought leadership? We are very active in this space, publishing everything from what's going on in specific categories and future trends through to what the future of procurement even is. We publish things like a supply chain volatility index, which is with S&P Global, which is all around how do we see supply chains in terms of how stretched they are, et cetera, going forward. So how do we bring all that together, as well as specialist consulting capability? For us, that's about advisory, but also getting things done, so that together we're using these strengths. And how do you take the best of both worlds? I think these points of the disruptive partnership are really important for that. One concept, again, which came up early, holding up a mirror. Both organizations, we're trying to say, you're not always doing things perfectly, but we'll be honest with you about that, and we'll say where we think you can do things better. And that's really essential, an honest viewpoint where we don't just say, yeah, everything's great, but we say, here's how we could do things better. So that's a really crucial thing. We also set joint targets, so we're all working in the same direction and towards the same things that matter, and very much a one-team mindset. And all of those things together have brought tremendous value in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, and really increasing the capability of procurement, which is really essential.
Yeah, they physically have the same targets as we do. So you are in principle our extended arm, and we partner together, and you keep us completely accountable, and vice versa. So it's,
and we tell you about it, and you tell us about it. Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. And then probably the last thing, just to cover a couple of examples before I hand back to Elisabeth to wrap up, because a lot of this, the overall theory and construct is really, really super important to make it work, but also it's about making things happen on the ground. So we're doing work together in many, many different areas. Just a few of the areas and a few projects selected from those here, just to give you a few examples. Again, using that construct of the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. So obviously areas like process, as you can imagine, 26 billion of spend, different business units. It's complicated. There's a lot of challenges, complexity there, but we've worked together initially on elimination. How do you take out tasks you don't need? How do you reduce those high volume, low value activities to the minimum as much as you can? How do you optimize? So standardization is really important. Standardization of globally as much as you can, as Elisabeth said, global center-led, not centralized, is important, but how do you drive efficiency from those things? And then really in the disrupt area, an example here is really looking at, and there's work ongoing on this at the moment, the end-to-end journey, but from a user lens. So what does the business user see? You know, it's very easy to get stuck in what does procurement feel every time? What am I feeling about my day-to-day work? But what does the user actually see? And we're taking that user lens to change things in terms of the process, speed things up, maximize value. Sustainability is a key topic for both organizations. There's a huge amount here. Again, some basics. There was a lot of work going for years around programs which are actually increasing or making improvements around sustainability, but tracking and recording those and bringing that together to show progress and to inspire has been important at the start. Then there's been a lot of work around diversity in terms of understanding what the landscape looks like, how much use of diverse suppliers are there, and how do we improve that. And then in the disrupt, actually a really cool example there is we're putting in place a structure so that when a sourcer or a requisitioner can actually make a selection of who are they inviting to an RFP or who are they selecting for a PO, they can auto-recommend diverse suppliers, so that it's not just a concept there, but they're actually enabled to do that, which people often are not aware of, even if they want to do that. And then obviously digitization, lastly, huge amount of work, and this is a big topic for Bayer, of course, for us as a software company as well. We do a massive amount in this area. Just a few selected examples. Again, clearly automation, very important in the scale we're dealing with, and there's a lot of work there. Point solutions, again, looking at the user experience and based on low-code platform to really, try and improve what the users are facing every day. But then also, there's lots of generative AI use cases out there that we've got, some of which are already in progress and we're working on and getting rolled out. So for example, category strategies at Bayer, you've got lots of different categories. The strategies are very comprehensive, documents over 100 pages. There's a lot of good content, but how do I actually access it? And we've actually trained a large language model to look at that and say, for example, I want to know in this category, what are the price indexes that might affect this? What's my sustainability plan in that? And it gives you that answer without going through all of that information, which I think is cool. So lots of overall good construct that we have, but also real examples on the ground, because that's what drives the value as well. So over to you, Elisabeth, to any wrap-up comments from you.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, hopefully we can. So we've already done quite a bit of work on the category strategy reduction and things of that nature. So we really do this together, and we have a lot of areas where we overlap. Of course, we also have a lot of our lighthouses that we run on our own on the front for thought leadership, but then we integrate GEP where we really need them, where they make sense for us. So what's most important, what we felt were the takeaways between us. Hopefully there's some nuggets here and for you. Disruption and innovation go together, but really I would encourage all of us to do new ways of working. And that's what I meant before with the people and culture. People and culture is the only way we're going to be able to transform procurement to where it's heading. Because procurement is not what many of us grew up with. It's a very different world, and it's been changing ever since. And actually, probably more so than ever, it's now skyrocketing. So we have to make sure we focus on a North Star would be our takeaways. Make sure you get everybody on the critical path. We actually, in fact, have a governance model, we call it the triangle, through which we don't allow in procurement. We're really going through the process right now of making sure only the critical projects that are on this path are permissible within our lighthouse model. It's not always an easy task, and there are a lot of debates around it, but it's very, very important that we get to that discipline, that we can still allow innovation. We don't want to ever stop to innovation, but also keep our critical path with the projects really close. Our operating model shift was quite extreme, and that's where GEP can speak to that actually too. The key focus areas, I would say, identifying our top 8 to 10 lighthouses, but keep in mind, foundationally, the digital foundation and the people are two of the most important elements of all of this that we're actually building. So make sure you're very focused on your topics. And people culture I mentioned, and using a strategic partner such as GEP, so you don't do everything yourself. I think very often procurement, with all the influx of information that's happening these days, we need to seek help. And I think it's important that we reach out to the right partners that can also be technology partners, but to make sure that we're complementary with each other. And through that, we can actually make that the 1 + 1 is 3 and innovate the world.
That's it. Great.
That's
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we still have time for any questions? I think we did, right?
I think we have a couple of minutes for questions. I'm not sure if I
don't know if anybody collects
Bastian
them
was
on
going to do the Slido.
Oh, here come the.
Do you have any have come up?
Thank you very much. We have a little delay, so we decided backstage if there are any questions for you or for you.
Okay.
Maybe it's the best way to catch you up in the VIP area or outside.
Perfect.
Just ask whatever they want to ask. Whatever you want to ask. And yeah, now we have a little lunch break. Wir
Great.
machen jetzt eine klitzekleine Mittagspause
Super.
und kommen